The world feels a bit toxic and blah these days, doesn't it? The same old people coming up with the same old solutions for big problems that still don't work. We need to change the game. Well, welcome to Women Advancing. Join me, host Kate Byrne, in this dynamic bi-weekly podcast, bringing together female founders, funders, and thought leaders. Listen to the people driving change, how they got there, how you can help, and yep, how you might just be the next one to advance. Proof that all ships rise with women at the helm. That's what happens when Women Advance with Kate Byrne. Hey everyone, it's your host Kate Byrne. So what does it take to leave the comfort and the credibility of a major media brand to start something of your own? And when I use the phrase major media brand, I'm referring to brands like Fox and Paramount. Yeah, that kind of major, that kind of household name. Well, for Jyoti Sarda, our guest today, it meant trading the safety net for a bold new mission and telling stories that drive civic engagement and shift culture. And thereby, she didn't say it, but I'm gonna provide a legacy for generations to come. And now, as the founder of Nimble Media and the producer behind projects like LILLY, which is the story of Lily Ledbetter, and She Could Be Next, which chronicles the elections of 5 women of color on their electoral journey, Jyoti is using film and media to spotlight movements, elevate underrepresented voices, and create impact so far beyond the screen. In this conversation, we talk about stepping into purpose, navigating risk with clarity, and why the future of storytelling is really as much about strategy as it is about soul. Listen in, and I can't wait to hear what you think. And remember to stay to the end. KB's takeaways. Thanks. Let's listen. Oh my word. Everyone who is a listener of Women Advancing, we are so in for a treat because we're going to get to sit down with Jyoti Sarda, who is the founder of Nimble Media. She's the producer of 2 documentaries and films that go beyond just documentaries. She Could Be Next, which came out last year. And then right now, the talk of the town, which is LILLY, which is the story of Lily Ledbetter and stars Patricia Clarkson. But more importantly, I knew Jyoti back when. And we've known each other since 2016 when we started can you imagine this effort called Girls Govern? But welcome, Jyoti, to Women Advancing.
Thanks, Kate. And it's interesting because I'm actually here in DC. I don't live in DC, but that's where we put on the Girls Govern conference back in 2016.
I know. So it's all kind of come full circle.
It is. It's perfect.
It is. I love that. And through that program, actually, we worked with participant media. So, and the reason why I'm so excited to talk to Jyoti is because she is literally the embodiment of someone who in 2016 said, I'm tired of doing what I'm doing, and I have this dream and I want to do this thing. And fast forward, she did it. And not only has she done it, she's done it really, really well. So we're going to find out a little bit. So that story, tell us about it. Like the line says, how did you get here?
Oh, wow.
It's a big one, I know. Well, because I have to say, you had a pivot, right? You were at Fox and Paramount, and then Shazam, Nimble Media.
Exactly. Well, this is actually my 3rd career because I actually started out in advertising. I used to work at, recognizable advertising agencies like Ogilvy and Mather and J. Walter Thompson, and on also recognizable brands like Kraft and Dole, et cetera. And I really loved it. And so that was sort of the genesis of my sort of marketing interest. But I always thought it would be interesting to use those skills for social good. And I've always had that at the back of my head. So I progressed from advertising into the other side of the client side, as they call it, and where that found expression was actually in the studio system. So I first started out at Fox, where I ended up running the then TV on DVD business, which I'm sure current day listeners won't remember, but it was really a big business back then. There were a lot of shows, a lot of what people talk about as binges they used to consume on DVD. So that's what I did at Fox. And then I moved on to work on all kinds of films like Fox Searchlight Pictures and also on Avatar, the first one that came out. And then I took a bit of a break, and that was Nimble Media 1.0. But then I very quickly found another outlet in Paramount, and I started working on the international home entertainment division. And there's a bunch of different remits involved. It was like DreamWorks and CBS and
Wow.
MTV, and we used to have Marvel back in those days. So there were a lot of fun titles to work on. I'm fast forwarding the 5 years that I spent having a great time putting all of those titles out. And then in about 2016, part of it is when you work in a big corporation, there's always sort of rounds of layoffs. And every time that happens, even if it doesn't happen to you, you think, well, what would I do? And I thought to myself, I need to have another plan. And I started actually thinking about entering the digital part of the business, which I didn't have as much experience in. But in the process of that, I ended up quitting my perfectly good job at Paramount. It was really nice, lovely, easy job in many ways. In 2016, not shortly after which we started working together on the Girls Govern project, and I started to kind of work for a streaming startup. And that didn't work out. So then but I'd already started to go for the first time ever to film festivals and was meeting filmmakers and documentary filmmakers. And I thought in all my wisdom that I would make a documentary about women in electoral politics, thinking with Hillary running for office, I had my perfect ending. And it
Ah.
turned out never script your documentary endings because that didn't work out. But that did launch me into the world of sort of producing. And so that's where I've been since then.
Which is so what were the blind spots you didn't see coming? So, you leave
So
to your
many.
point, corporate, comfy, blah, blah, and you're doing impact work for sure.
Yeah.
But what were some of the blind spots that you came up? And were any of them ever so big and vast that you thought, I gotta go scurry back? Well, I mean, I guess not, since you haven't, but
Well, we're going to have some straight talk here because
yeah.
one of the things that is really important to know is I had a safety net when I
Ah,
took that
true.
leap. And so if I hadn't had that, I spent several years in very nicely paying jobs. So I not only had my own sort of nest egg from which to go off and launch a risky career move,
Right.
but I also, I'm married and I had a safety net. And
Right.
so that is, I think, very critical because if I didn't have that, I would have a different experience. You do end up with long periods of time when you're working on projects and you're not seeing a financial return. And sometimes, because of the nature of these projects, are not always commercial, the financial return is not as grand as one would hope. So, in the one thing that was a complete blind spot on my part is I hadn't really intended to launch into producing. I just thought I'd helped a friend work on a documentary about the Equal Rights Amendment. And in doing so, learned so many things about our legal system and how women are truly not protected in it. And so it was really an act of activism in that moment in 2016. And if those of you can remember, that's when many of us started to become more politically active because of the
Yeah.
nature of the political landscape. And I just thought, if more women understood this part of the system and understood how powerful their vote was and how important it was to have elected officials who looked and thought like them, that we would have a better system of governance, and then we would easily pass the Equal Rights Amendment because there would be these very logical thinking women in office who would understand that we needed it. What I was wrong about was the fact that my business background was going to make, or my marketing background was going to make that process of filmmaking easier. That was my big blind spot. It did not make it easier.
Did it help at all, or did it
Oh,
did it
yeah. Well, it
support it?
helps. Yeah, it helps when it comes to look, I'm an excellent partner on a filmmaking team and a partner who often filmmaking teams don't have because I do understand what happens after a film is made, and I'm not
Mhm.
afraid of it. And it's really helpful when it comes to impact work, because so much of figuring out how to take a piece of content, a story, if you will, and get it to its intended audience in a meaningful way is about marketing. So I will say, yes, of course, that did eventually end up being an excellent skill set to have. And it just didn't make the process of filmmaking any easier. And I have a lot of respect. And I think everyone who steps off into a new career, absolutely do it. But just understand it's always good to investigate the landscape a little bit and not have too much hubris about how you can make it easier for yourself, because sometimes it's just not any easier.
Right. Well, and I also think that's very sage advice too, because so many times, I speak for myself here. I think, yeah, 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 yeah. It's so easy to say, but I'm going to be different. It's going to be different. And someone could say, how's it going to be different? It's like, well, it's me. It's going to be different. And hence, that will make all the difference in the world. I am the special sauce. I am.
And we are the special sauce. And I think it is, I would still say go do it.
Yeah.
So whatever it takes to get you to jump off, I think is good. And sometimes you need a little blind spot. Otherwise, we'd all just be, too worried
So,
about what would happen next.
why do you think film in particular is such a strong avenue platform for this kind of storytelling?
Well, there's a lot of different platforms,
Mm,
uh, and I respect all of them. But I do think storytelling, because it doesn't have to be film, just
right.
happens to be a medium I'm comfortable with. But I'm very podcast curious, for example. I think that's a great storytelling medium.
Right.
There's a lot of different ways to tell stories. And I think it all starts with the fact that when I was in advertising, our best ads were telling stories in a very short amount of time, right? I mean,
Right.
best marketing comes from actually doing just that, not just telling people what you want them to know, but you get them to think about the way you want them to think by telling them a story that resonates with them, that then causes them to want to take an action. And I think really good filmmakers do that too. They may not be completely clear on the action that they want to take, but somewhere in their souls, they have some idea of why they want to tell the story, and some idea of what the intended reaction they that they're trying to pull out of their viewer. And also, I think storytelling, get hits on so many different modalities. I guess
Yeah.
it's emotional, it's logical, it's sight, sound, emotion if you're doing a film. So, I don't know if that's a complete answer, but it's some of the things that attract me to this particular medium.
Because no, it makes sense. Because I would think sometimes with some stories, it might be hard to kind of find that balance between the story and the art and the advocacy, right? So you want to get this message because those two films in particular, right? She Could Be Next and Lily. They're really important stories, and your timing is obviously quite intentional and impeccable.
Yeah, they're different.
Very
Documentary
different.
is different. And, one of the things I think is important, and again, going back to storytelling,
Yeah.
is you want to try to avoid telling people how to think and feel.
Don't
But,
want to be preachy.
right. And so documentaries can fall into a trap of being sort of like good for you, like health food, right? This is good for
Right.
you to see this. But if you manage some of the really beautiful, there's some great documentaries out there that also manage to tell an emotional story, manage to sort of grab your heart. Usually what happens is the best documentaries have these phenomenal characters at the center of them, people who
Mhm.
you want to know more about. And then you get the important facts and the advocacy, if you will, through following that character. But if you just I don't know, maybe you've seen this. They're called talking heads. Like, you have somebody on camera
Right.
and they're telling you, and then you have some maybe facts flashing by. And I don't know if those are as resonant for people. They can be, I suppose, but I think the ones that really last with you are the ones that touch you in a different place. And I think feature films do that in even better way because you're sort of fictionalizing the narrative and you get to play with all the levers of fictional storytelling. And you have a great actor or actors who tell those stories in even richer and more emotionally resonant ways. So
They make
that's
it
the way I would
all,
answer that question.
yeah, no, they make it also, I think, incredibly relatable. Right. And that's what I was thinking is, for some, they can see themselves or they hear themselves or they can understand what the characters are going through because it's almost, you have to see it to believe it. And for those who have been
Yeah.
naysayers, possibly witnessing it that way, that might be a way of opening a door or sticking a foot in. So, one of the things, though, I know you've spent time too on is sort of lifting up the voices and the stories of populations that are so often overlooked. So, what do we lose when those stories aren't told,
Yeah.
and what do we gain when they are?
Well, it's so, I think for me, I just gravitate towards those stories. And, maybe it's because I am the daughter of an immigrant. I am of Indian, background. While I've, born in this country, very much an American, I just sort of gravitate to stories that feature people who I have something in common with. Maybe not directly, but something. I can access their experience.
Right.
And what is missing? It's like if you just keep watching stories about people, it's like when you just surround yourself with people like yourself, you never expand your own consciousness. And it's life, I think, is a little bit more boring, frankly. It's fun to meet and learn and engage with people who are different. Sometimes it's annoying also, but generally speaking, I like meeting different people and I like hearing stories from all walks of life. And I think absolutely that's missing for everyone, even if they don't even agree with what the character's point of view is. It's like you're just getting a window into some other life that I think just sort of expands your own.
So, have you discovered or felt or experienced, has there been any kind of change as far as you're getting support as, a woman, as you said, as daughter of immigrants, as a woman of color, as it were?
Well, it's interesting in some ways, yes. So, what's happened since 2016?
Yeah.
We started, so having more than one woman run for president has certainly been kind of
A
interesting.
boon.
Both of those people, both of those candidates raised an enormous amount of money behind their campaigns. And so people got comfortable backing women running for office. So that's like one general backdrop.
That's,
Also, within that time frame, we had several movements, right? We had a Me Too movement,
yep.
Black Lives Matter, and those movements uh, also raised consciousness of, I guess, what do you want to call them, underserved populations.
Right.
And so, and while there's been a rise and a fall behind that. I mean, now there's sort of a backlash against it. Still, what you have is people who got used to and, just backing or being interested or engaging with certain populations. And I think that is good. And then also the people who are, or the funders, let's say, who are most
Right.
interested in making sure those stories are being told became more focused in their support. So we definitely, in the wake of the first Trump presidency, we were raising funds for And She Could Be Next. And that focus, it started out being a little bit broader about women in elected office. And it ended up being more focused into women of color running for elected office because that was the only bright spot that came out of that election cycle. There were five really interesting women, and one of them was Kamala Harris being elected as senator from California. Another woman was Pramila Jayapal, who is now a prominent leader in Congress. So it just was an interesting time. So we followed that trend, and people would ask us, why only women of color? And we had to say, because we're covering a couple of different trends, and we feel sort of the advance wave of change. It can be found through these candidates. And frankly, we find that if you look to see what these candidates are doing today, you'll find that they are absolutely, whether you agree with them or you don't agree with them, they are bold, they are authentic, and they are at the sort of forefront of their movements. So in that same way, but we were able to find full funding, and we were able to get
Wow.
PBS to, because of our viewpoint, actually picked up our series and ran it, and it played into the 2020 election. Then with LILLY, what was interesting, LILLY Ledbetter, everybody had sort of heard of her, even though this is about a working class white woman from the South. Everybody had sort of heard of this story, and she has this sort of every woman, every man type of quality, because if you're working class, you relate to her. If she never was a divisive figure.
Right.
And she wasn't a divisive figure, by the way, politically either way. She also, worked with people across the aisle
Right.
in pursuit of her legislation. So what we found was, people were very eager to bring her story to the screen, and we were able to actually get what you call equity investment in the movie. But we're also able to get donors because
Nice.
there's a social return on this movie. And after the Dobbs decision, our fundraising improved, even though this movie did not, and the storyline behind LILLY, it's really more about pay equity than it is about reproductive rights. But
Right.
in general, I think a lot of female donors were seeing that we needed to have stories about strong women fighting for change out in the world. And we were one of those stories. So that would be my answer. Now, in this moment, it's a tough time
Yeah.
because funding is being cut from all kinds of arts organizations. There's a real attack on DEI. So therefore, companies are thinking twice, potential sponsors are thinking twice. They might be actually advocates for DEI, so to speak, diversity for sure, but they just want to sort of steer clear of controversy in this moment, or they don't know what to do, or
Right.
organize it like nonprofits who would typically have funded a project,
Yes.
not only have lost their funding, but are kind of sitting back and trying to think about what their strategy is. And so it's a really bad time in 2025.
Oof.
Say.
Ugh. Well, I'm glad
Yeah.
that you were able to get the other, though, at least to get it up and going. So, with all that, when I mean, you're not just really chasing ratings at the box office, but also impact. How would you define that kind of success, or what would that look like?
Well, it's interesting. I guess Participant, which is also sadly defunct,
I know.
um, had it used to have what they called a double bottom line. So we always, as a film team, said we owe a social return to
Hmm.
our supporters, and we owe a financial return, and we believe we can do both. So we have a movie that is entertaining, it's well acted, it's got a gripping storyline at the center of it, regardless of whether you're trying to create some sort of social change. It's an enjoyable movie to watch, and people like these types of movies. I mean, in the past, if you think about a Norma Ray or an Aaron Brockovich,
Yep.
have been actually award-winning roles for these actors, and they have proven themselves at the box office. So that was always the approach we took, and that's what we're still trying to take, is trying to have both, trying to succeed at both objectives.
which will be great to see. It's really interesting. If someone is wanting to get a start, because I lately have had so many out here, because Charlottesville is more of it's a university town, but there have been other folks, friends from the Bay Area, all that. A lot of people, it feels, are turning to film as a tool for change. Where do you have any advice where they start?
Well, I think
Or what not to do? Like, watch out.
I think it's understanding that there has to be a long horizon, that the project could take time. So just whatever you need to prepare yourself for that, having, sort of a safety net of sorts, whatever the safety net looks like, I think is important. Or understanding you're going to work on it as a side hustle, if you will, for a while. It just all depends on how you're going about it. But the first place to start is in a story that you feel you need to tell. If you don't have that, then it won't keep you going during the tough times, and there will be tough times. So for all of these stories that I've been a part of, I really wanted to tell the story. And so when we encountered obstacles, the determination to get the story out in the world was really helpful to, amongst all of us. We all, got ourselves, because inevitably somebody gets frustrated or has a personal issue that they have to deal. Like, there's just things that come up in life. Right. And then the other person on your team kind of lifts you up and keeps you going. And inevitably it's the story that pulls you forward. So it really has to be something not like, oh, you think with your head, this could be an award-winning movie. It could be, but you don't know that. This could make a lot of money. It could be, but you don't know that either. It just has to be something you really want to work on for several years and you really feel needs to be told. And then also try to figure out, for me, here's one thing I did. When I was starting out with And She Could Be Next, I had not made a documentary myself. I had helped other people. So I looked for people who knew what they were doing and to partner with. And so I had a great story idea, I thought, but I didn't have, and I had my own skill set, but I didn't have practical production knowledge the way other people who have done this for decades. And so I found partners who were super skilled at that. And, there's always a bit of friction with somebody who, it's like when you're playing tennis with somebody who's not quite at pickleball now, I guess these days, not quite at your level. And you're like, okay, well, maybe you need to go take a lesson before you come play with me. But if you find that right mixture, then you are just making sure you've covered your bases, because inevitably somebody else will want to tell the same story you are wanting to tell. And maybe they've done it before, and that can just speed things along because they will kind of have a sense of road bumps that you don't need to go through because they already have. So those are some thoughts I have.
Well, yeah. And thank you for those. When we were just talking about, inevitably there's frustrations, you run into obstacles. So what buoyed you up?
Different things, because, for example, I worked on a documentary called Black Barbie where I helped the filmmaker Legeria Davis in the beginning of her journey and helped her put together a pitch reel and went with her to pitch meetings. And then I found I didn't have the time to see it all the way through. And also, it was also coming into a time where we felt she needed to have, frankly, a Black producer working with her. It was, that time period with the movements. And so we helped her find that person. And then she went on to she took it the last two legs. And, it's okay to be helpful in whatever way you want to be helpful. And for And She Could Be Next, my partners and I were just really driven by the moment, the political moment. This was our political expression. We were driven by the people we were following, because we filmed in 2018 and then it came out in 2020, but we knew we had a very specific idea of what moment we wanted this to come out into. And we were so inspired by the women who were running for office and the organizers who worked around them that we just, I can't tell you how uplifting and also just, yeah, determined we were. So that was that particular. For LILLY, it took a lot longer and different phases of time. There was a fundraising phase, there was a production phase, and then there was a release phase, and each had its. And so we have quite a few producers, and each of us played different roles in different phases. And I think just all helped each other, because someone would end up losing, just feeling, oh, this is too hard. And
Right.
then someone else would, sort of have just the kind of spirit that was needed to kind of keep going. And also different people took the lead. So it wasn't just me or just the director or just say, the lead producer was working on the production itself. It was all of us doing a bit of a baton handoff, which sometimes is also important because sometimes you have to pay attention to your life and other things that you're doing.
Well, that was one thing I was going to ask is because working in a collaborative, cohort like you did, sometimes that works and sometimes it doesn't. But it sounds like for you, for the most part, it really did. It was such an ebb and flow, probably because the story, it wasn't if I'm getting this right, it was less about power dynamics and it was more about the story and getting
Yeah.
this tail out there.
I don't think it would be honest to say there wasn't conflict or friction. There just is. It's like you
Yeah.
get a bunch of, especially I tend to work with very strong-willed women.
Yep.
And we all are type A. We all want to get things done. And oh yes, no, that would be a falsehood to say. But no, there was definitely conflict. But what does pull you forward is wanting to tell the story.
Yeah.
And so you work it out because
Right.
in the end, you're all what I have found is always at the heart of it is the commitment to the story. In our case, we had an actual live person in Lily Ledbetter that we wanted, for that story. But it's not even, I don't even know whether to call it a power dynamic, is it can express itself that way. It's just people feel passionately and then
Right.
they see that they have a solution and maybe the other person doesn't see it that way. You just have to work these things out. I can't say exactly how. It is worth getting to know the partners that you plan to, just like it's like a marriage of sorts. It's a
Right.
temporary marriage, perhaps, but it's very intense and intimate in many ways. You spend a lot of time with people on a project, and sometimes you're working on different projects at the same time. So it's different dynamics. So being flexible is certainly helpful.
Going in with eyes wide open because I think so often some people think and they look and they hear, on the other side of going through making a film and everybody gets up there and they're shaking and waving and, oh, great, we did it. Yay. Everyone thinks, oh, they're so lucky. It's always like that. We fight like this, like left and right. It's okay to do that because it's human nature and you're not
It
alone.
is. It is, especially when you're passionate and strong-willed and some those are some of the qualities that generally attract people to this kind of work anyway.
Well,
So
it's a great way. It's a great way to put a lot of positive energy towards something. So, in closing, knowing what you know now, I always ask this question, but I love this question because I think it's one that's really helpful. Knowing what you know now, what advice would you give your younger self?
well, it's interesting you should say that, Kate, because I actually have a daughter who is just starting out in the workforce. And I try to tell her the advice that I have learned. It's interesting. You also have to let people make their own mistakes, as it turns out, which
Mhm.
I'm trying. But I do say to her, don't say sorry. Erase that from your vocabulary. You can explain why something has happened that went awry, but you don't have to say you're sorry. We all as women say sorry too often. That's one. I am guilty of that as well.
Okay.
I would be bolder.
Mm.
Don't be
Mhm.
so afraid. There, especially when you're young, none of it, I don't want to say it doesn't matter, but take risks. That now's
Right.
the time to take risks. When you have children and a mortgage and or rent to pay, when there are other responsibilities, I'm not going to be so flippant. But even though I do believe even at that point you should take risks,
Right.
but it is harder to take risks.
Right.
People are depending on you. Life isn't so flexible. I do think you can take risks and go down avenues that may not look like they will pay out, because maybe they will. Maybe they will. Or they will add something to your life that you just can't predict from where you are right now. Yeah, I say surround yourself with interesting people. Maybe those are the three things.
Yeah.
Like you, Kate.
Well, so
you're the gift that keeps on giving.
Yes.
I don't see you for a while, then we connect like it's been no time at all.
I know, that's what I love so much. And I'm smiling because I was going to ask you about your daughter. But I'm glad to hear that I'm not the only mom whose daughters still don't listen to her, or they think, oh my gosh, if I get one more eye roll, and yet someone else tells them the same advice, it's like, oh, this is brilliant. You think, okay, all right, yeah. But you know what? I'm pretty sure I probably did the same thing. That goes right back to that. It's human nature. It is.
So maybe our younger self wouldn't have listened to us.
That's exactly right. They would have said, talk to the hand. Sorry. So, yeah. Well, listen, Jyoti, such a pleasure. I'm so glad reunited, and it feels so good. And thank you for all your different, windows and pearls of advice for folks who are listening. And I can't wait to see what you come up with next.
Thank you.
And I will be clapping. And if I had a vote at the Academy, you and yours would obviously win.
Knock on wood.
Thanks so much.
All right. Thanks, Kate.
Wow. It has been such fun getting reunited and reconnected with Jyoti. And she is such a powerhouse on so many different levels. And our relationship is actually a perfect example of what Jyoti speaks at the end, where there are going to be some projects you're not going to be really quite sure why you're getting involved, but you're going to walk away with something that is important. She walked away with two things. One was the fire in her belly to go and be bold and take that step and start that film and her Nimble media company. Second, clearly, yours truly. But in all serious, KB's takeaways, which I thought really kind of resonated. First and foremost, a film is essentially a startup effort. It's a startup program. It's a startup company. So all the fundraising advice and suggestions that she makes relevant to all you founders out there, for sure. Second, every company, every partnership, there's going to be two people involved at least, right? Going to have different opinions and such. Remember to go higher and go for the bigger thing rather than just what your own little ego play is. And when you do, if you tap into that, that's what's going to help you get through the other side. Because so many really smart projects, efforts, companies, programs have been taken down to their knees because of ego. Don't let that happen. Third, I loved her advice to herself of be bolder. Don't be so afraid. Now is the time, especially if you're early on in your career, now's the time to take a risk. Fast forward, if you are and find yourself in the fortunate situation where you do have access to a plan B or a safety net around you, heck, jump into that pool, take that risk. It's okay. You're going to have more regret and be more harmed by not doing so. And finally, don't say sorry. Just dip it. Don't say it. That, and I'm going to slip one more in. It's never just you. It's you. And that's a lot. So thanks so much for listening. Look forward to the next conversation on Women Advancing. Thanks for listening. May this episode inspire you to move forward. Be sure to go to iTunes, Spotify, katebyrne.co, that's KATEBYRNE.co, or wherever you listen to your podcasts, and listen to even more episodes. Here's to strong women. May we know them, may we be them, may we raise them.
Be sure to meet them on the next Women Advancing. Ta till next time.